Another half anniversary started and we get another crazy unit that got released. Not catching a break with so much meta units releasing lately, Siren, or Little Mermaid, also didn't get a break with so much fuss about her skill kit when it initially got revealed. There are some things where I expected her to be in the category, and there are some where I didn't expect her to be even better. Here, I'm going to break down to you how she overall performs, and how you can utilize her effectively. On top of that, I normally don't provide a section for this in my review videos, but I will also talk a little about using her in PvP. You'll definitely get the bang for your buck with this one. With that out of the way, let's begin with the review for Little Mermaid. Just recently I did the video of scoring each used character in Nikke in terms of where and likely how often we're going to use a character in what content. And Siren is at the top of usage as Burst 1, including comparing to both Red Hood and Rapi Red Hood as Burst 1. Note that this is in terms of how much frequently we'll see this character used in every content out right now. Although if we compare her directly with Rapi Red Hood, the main difference I would say between them is that Siren has more use in PvP than Rapi Red Hood. In terms of PvE performance, Siren is in the top of the charts right now in terms of different elements. Naturally, she takes the #1 spot in win advantage content right now, being also a good DPS in the Burst 1 category. She does fit in both teams of with Crown and also with Maid duos. She also has a good synergy with the Maid duos of Mast and Anchor thanks to their high attack buffs, which Siren takes heavy advantage on. So with this, Siren is viable to both Crown and Maid team. In water content, she also takes the #1 spot, thereby only slightly higher than Rapi Red Hood. She has a good synergy with Ludmilla being a machine gun, and even if we take her away from the Crown team, she is also still viable in the Maid duos team similar to the Wind team. Right now, both water and wind can take heavy advantage of Siren because these two elements are also the ones that can take the most advantage of the Maid duos. So just with these two elements alone, her longevity is pretty promising already. Moving on to other elements, let's take a look at Iron Advantage. Technically speaking, if we're talking about just one team, the best Burst 1 is still Rapi Red Hood thanks to her elemental typing. But there's a caveat to this. The current issue lies with most people's investments on Iron unit. At the moment, people have very limited investments on Burst 3 for Iron Advantage. Chances are, majority have only invested in Red Hood. Some of you have also probably invested in Snow White or Maxwell, but even then, their optimal use depends on the boss whether there's lots of parts available for multi-hit. Here comes in Siren for Iron. What she allows is to move Rapi Red Hood into Burst 3 position. So situationally speaking, Siren becomes the best Burst 1 position for many people right now because many people don't have a good second Burst 3 Iron Advantage invested. Later down the road though, once we have at least one other, but likely two more new Burst 3 Iron DPS, I can see Rapi Red Hood taking back the B1 spot of the best Burst 1 Iron. So at the moment, Siren's ranking in B1 for Iron Advantage is a split between #1 and #2 spot with Rapi Red Hood. It depends on the account situations, and for the most part, we're waiting for the next better Burst 3 DPS. And in the same regards with Iron, fire situation is the same. Although there's plenty of fire DPS unit out there right now, for majority of the people, they don't really come close to Rapi Red Hood's damage. With over-spec mihara coming out, this fills in the other B3 spot, but not Rapi Red Hood's spot. So for many people, Siren will still take #1 B1 spot as well for fire, and for some, it'll be #2 depending how invested their other fire units are. Now comes in with electric. Due to how heavy HP buff reliant is Cinderella and Winter Maiden are, Rouge takes the top spot still here for most situations. Later, Siren and Rapi Red Hood do come trailing behind for various account situations or fights. Another thing to note in Siren's performance is that she opens up to build a different kind of team building now, but used to not be very good before. In particular, the team building back then typically involves us top players to have at least a sniper rifle or rocket launcher in the team in order to have enough energy gain. We typically make sure to pre-charge these units before full burst ends so that we can catch the next burst rotation to its fullest cooldown reduction time. This typically ensures us to be able to burst up to 14 bursts in a full 3-minute fight. People who are autoing typically only get about 11 to 13 bursts in a full fight with a cooldown reduction unit. Depending on the unit setup, this is a heavy damage loss. If we set up a full machine gun team without using Grave, getting more bursts is difficult to achieve. With Siren in the equation, this provides an alternative to just having a machine gun team with Grave and opens up a more team building setup with other burst 2 units. But that's her overall performance in terms of PvE and bossing. Overall, she's between first and second place across the board right now. In the long term, I can see her being second place in different elements once we get more burst 1 category. But you'll definitely get your value's worth for her right now. In terms of other content, she's also very good for campaign as her stun allows her to borrow some time, especially for some priority targets. This can come in clutch in situations to give time to do another burst, so her value is pretty high up there. On top of that, she has no ramp up time cooldown similar to Rapi Red Hood, which makes her burst rotation a lot smoother for campaign. But I also find her the most surprising on her performance that I feel has been under the radar is definitely PvP. Don't let her typing, which is submachine gun, trick you into thinking that she's not good at PvP. With her presence in PvP, this actually makes other players to think about their team building and positioning in PvP. Her presence also enables many other teams to actually be more viable than before. So how exactly does she do it? Well, if your answer is her stun skill, you are correct. But my next question is, what's the effect of this in the grand scheme of things? Certainly, we've seen stun before in PvP like regular Privity's burst, and in fact Privity's stun is team-wide instead, which seems to be more useful than Siren's single target stun, right? Well, you see, Siren's stun happens pretty fast. It's roughly around the speed of between second and third rocket launcher shot in PvP. By the way, I will be making a PvP guide later as well, so make sure you're subscribed now if you haven't yet. I'll explain more in detail PvP mechanics and details, so if you don't want to miss out, go subscribe now. But to explain it in simpler terms, the way we talk about unit of measurement in PvP is how many rocket launcher shots does it take before a team can do a full burst. The fastest full burst speed in most circumstances is 2 rocket launcher shots. There's exceptions to this and can be faster, but I'll hold on that thought and not complicate this anymore for this explanation. Generally speaking, team building wise, people would usually place their units they want to burst in the leftmost position. This is usually because they have a valuable burst that's useful for that team composition. But this positioning restriction ends up becoming Siren's advantage. Usually Siren's stun comes up right before they get the chance to burst. The way Siren shoots is she shoots from left to right, which means that there's a very good chance that she will disrupt the opponent's optimal burst rotation unless the opponent is expecting their first unit to die. Her stun also allows teams with slower burst generation to have a way to catch up even if they generate burst slower, thanks to her stun that disrupts enemies' burst. In SP Arena defense, she's a bit easier to counter as you can identify what they're going to do. But if you use her for offense, you can specifically build teams to counter the enemy defense if they didn't account for Siren well. On top of that, in Champion Arena, where people's positionings can be random and you have no way you can specifically counter your positioning, you can use this to your advantage and make a team with Siren with less to worry about getting countered. Overall, Siren's PvP can have a decent effect in PvP and team building that makes her more valuable than most other B1 units that are just good for PvE. So, are you convinced enough for Siren? If you aren't picking her up yet, I don't know what else will convince you. But if you are set in stone to build her, let's get right into giving you tips on building her. Seriously, if you aren't giving her the 10-10-10 treatment right now, I don't know what you are doing. But okay, let's say that money's tight and you have to spread out your investments. First, let's max out her skill 1. This is the most valuable skill that she has as it's all about her cooldown reduction, which is the biggest reason for using her. In the most extreme budget build, assuming that there's higher priority DPS that you have to build, then I would go with just 10-4-4 or 10-7-4 to utilize her primarily as support. In a real budget build, I would probably go 10-7-7 to have a little bit of everything. But ideally, I would get her at 10-10-10 due to her value currently as likely the most used burst 1 at the moment and for the foreseeable future until we get another power creep. In terms of overload building, I would primarily build her with 4x elemental and 4x attack as the highest priority before anything else. Her not having much attack buff will make her attack overload very valuable for herself. Then, the third line for each piece varies. At most, I would give her 1 to 2 max ammo lines, but I wouldn't try to get more than that. She has very low reload speed time, and she also has ammo replenish on her own burst. Then you can just run as many crit lines as you can. You can run 4 times of either crit rate or crit damage, make sure and ignore the ammo if somehow your RNG works to that way. A lot of her damage comes from her skill, but this skill frequency is caused by other units mostly, and specifically other machine guns. This makes her needing ammo not as important for herself. In terms of cube, my primary choice is Bastion. With her reload ammo on her burst, this makes Bastion a bit more valuable. If you somehow didn't get much ammo lines and running her with crown, giving her resilience is another option. In an elemental advantage situation, I would give her the highest level cube to take advantage of the damage she provides and scaling with bonus elemental damage. For Dull, I would at least provide her with SR5 level of Dull. Most of her damage doesn't come from her basic attack though, so the multiplier from her basic attack bonus for leveling up the Dull isn't going to give much mileage. However, the main benefit for leveling up the Dull will also be more for raw stats that she gets. So if you're competitive for PvE and also for PvP, SR15 would be a good investment for her. Phew, that's a load of information. If you get to this point of the video and haven't done so yet, just a reminder to click that subscribe now if you find this video useful. A lot of you might not realize you haven't subscribed yet, so this is just a reminder. More Nikke videos and other games will come out, so be sure to watch out for them. I'm also having a separate project right now where I'm playing some old retro games right now, and actually I am starting off with the old classic that I loved when I was a kid, which is Digimon World 1. If you guys are interested in that, hey, come go check out some of those videos that I have in here. Now, moving on to teams, this is where many variations come out now with so many units out. Water is quite possibly the most variation that can be mixed around right now. Now, there's so many different ones out right now that you could end up using, so I'm just going to be primarily focusing on the most used or likely used or the best ones right now. I'll start off with a team that not many people expect or I kind of noticed talking about. Starting off with Siren, Crown, Helm, and Ludmilla and Maid. Maid as the flex unit is a unit that not many people really is expecting to know how to properly use. But with water setup, the rotation of your burst goes to Crown, and the third burst is Maid. You basically do a rotation of Mast every third burst. It will alternate who's receiving the Mast burst, but it still does a hell of a lot of damage. Starting off from here, you can switch off different units out. Ludmilla being the most replaceable one, you can put Bready or Quency in this team setup as well. Naturally, other B3 water units can also be used here like Winter Guillotine if no other options. Bready should be also outperforming Quency in situations where boss has no core, so that's something to consider as well. An alternative for this is also when you don't have Maid instead is now a flex spot to either Viper Treasure or Ludmilla. Or if the boss has core, Naga is also another option when no other units are there. Utilizing Naga allows for a more multiple team setup of putting Helm into other teams instead if you need some healing for other teams. Another alternative for Siren also works with the Maid Duos team combo. As mentioned before, Siren do benefit well with the Maid Duos, especially with Mast if you have her in crit build. So I do expect Siren to be delegated to Maid Duos if we get another top tier future Water B1 support DPS. In the same regards for Water, Wind is in a similar situation. Siren, Crown, SBS, Wind Asuka, and Helm Treasure is likely the primary team for most people. But as usual, we'll find alternatives as well. Wind Asuka can be replaced with Alice for the classic SBS plus Alice combo. Helm can also be replaced with Mana, Naga, or Noir, or Mast as alternatives if you don't have Treasured Helm. When building two teams, Siren fits in either teams with Crown or Maid Duos. You'll likely fill in where Siren will be, but highly likely it'll be where the Crown team is. Now for both Fire and Iron, there's primary setup right now of Siren, Crown, Rapi Red Hood, with the Flex Burst 3 and Helm Treasure in majority of the circumstances. With over-spec mihara coming out, she'll likely take that spot for Fire advantage. And for Iron advantage, with much less options out right now, we're kind of stuck with Red Hood for now. Helm as a flex spot is also replaceable depending on the boss and account situations. Naga being one of the most flexible spot for that when the boss has core. She can still see the value in there with good synergy with Rapi Red Hood, having her damage can be affected by core bonus. You can also use Summer Helm as a flex option for Iron Advantage as an alternative. And at any point of this setup also you can sub in Grave as an alternative for Crown. One other final interesting thing you can set up also is Siren Crown with Rapi Red Hood and Helm and Maid Mast. This setup fully takes advantage of the soul carry for Rapi that you might not expect. As a bonus section, I'll also talk a little bit of some themes for PvP. I mentioned before that Siren enables teams that are naturally slow for burst generation, but that doesn't mean that she's only for slow teams. She's also usable in both fast and slow teams. In a slow burst team, she can be utilized in a team that typically uses Biscuit, as generally most Biscuit teams are slow at bursting. Usually they are sitting at 2.5 or 3 rocket launcher speed bursts. Siren is also an option for a team with Blanc in them that relies on indomitability for the DPS to survive long enough. In some common Blanc setup teams, especially in Champion Arena, most Blanc have 3 rocket launcher speed setup, which makes her stun more valuable. If RNG also sets up in Champion Arena positioning and you become a defense team, she can also work with Shotgun team, as she can stun the front line while Shotgun team hits the back line. If the Shotgun team with Siren ends up on offense, it puts immense pressure on the front line of the enemy if they're not prepared for it. In a fast burst team, she's also usable in the Jackal Scarlet team or Cinderella Treasure Helm team, where they can aim for 2 rocket launcher bursts. This usually allows them to counter Noah teams where Noah burst and counter their AoE burst damage. So overall, I think Siren is definitely a unit you must pull out right now. Without thinking too much on the future units, she should be right now the #1 spot in terms of burst 1 category. She opens up different team building in both PvE with machine guns and PvP for slower burst teams that can shape up the form of meta in the current landscape of things. I can foresee her value being less for other elements as more element-specific specialties come out for each of their respective elements, but she should still see longevity in wind advantage at the very least. Once a new set of power level with power creep releases also, the value of her damage might not be worth the trade-off for better buffers in the future, but that's something we'll worry about when the time comes. So in terms of pool, definitely at least 1 copy. In terms of duplicates, as usual, I'll say it again, 1 copy is more than enough, but I know that's not the answer that you're looking for. Well, duplicates should give you a good mileage in competitive in both PvE and PvP. Her DPS currently as burst 1 is still the top amongst everything else, and maybe for some people, might even surpass some units because it is easier to min-max her overloads. Primarily only requiring attack and elemental without excessive need for max ammo, and rerolling her important lines is easier compared to do other DPS compared to like Rapi or with Asuka. Having duplicates also avoid being easily CP suppressed in PvP and SP arena attacking. But yeah, that's about it for now. What are your guys' thoughts on Siren? How has she been performing for you guys? Are you pulling more after seeing this video? Well, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to come hang out with us on Twitch. Come follow me at Twitch, twitch.tv/xguillotine, and I'm usually free to answer questions there. Again, I usually am more live more often on Twitch whenever we're just chilling and hanging out. Leave a comment and like to help out the YouTube stuff, and don't forget to click that subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And as usual, I'll see you guys next time.